why don't we move on to introductions by some of our esteemed panelists. Alison, would you like to go first?
My name is Alison Murdock, and I am the founder and chief marketer at Trusted CMO. I started this company just before the pandemic really unleashed its fury on the rest of the world, so about a year ago. And I work with early stage startups to help them build a marketing function. Most of my customers are not marketers by trade, so they are very confused about what it takes to market, though they know they need to do it. In terms of background, I have a long history in events. Actually, I had my own events company, and I've also worked as a partner to SaaStr, and I'm an investor and advisor to a new virtual events platform called Goldcast, which I highly encourage you to check out if you haven't seen it. It's perfect for field events and ABM, and I can talk a little bit about what they've built when it's relevant. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Alison. Happy to have you. Nick?
Hey everyone, I'm Nick, based in Boston. So I am the director of ABM and field marketing over at Alyce. We are a corporate gifting platform, which plays really nicely into using it for ABM and field events. We've seen a ton of success and a huge uptick of customers, specifically during the pandemic. I've been doing field marketing and ABM for around the last 8 years. Super excited to be here. And similar to Alison, I also advise Goldcast and cannot recommend it enough to people. So definitely check it out.
Hello, everyone. This is Alex. I'm at DEEM and Enterprise Holdings Company, and I run the head of portfolio marketing over there. And sort of the questions, there's so many great questions that everybody is coming in today, and I love to pair all of that. And so the things that I'm always looking to solve with our team and the board is looking at, hey, you've got $1 or $100 or $1,000 or $1 million coming into marketing. What's that ROI? So if you have that $1, is that turned into $5, $10, $20, and looking at how do you scale and exponentially get better and better ROI. So that's what keeps me up at night, which is one way to say it. But yeah, looking forward to meeting all of you. Thank you.
Hey everyone, Poleg, based out of New York. I'm the VP of Marketing and Sales Operations for Kaltura. Kaltura is a video cloud company. We work with some of the world's largest enterprises, providing them with video solutions for remote communication, remote collaboration, remote learning, and also for virtual events. Very excited to be here.
I'm Ashley. I'm the Director of Customer Marketing at LeanData. We are a Salesforce native app that matches leads and contacts to accounts. So post-event, making sure that your reps are able to follow up on the people that attend your events. So I have run a lot of events for our customers, but also on the demand gen side, a lot of our events highlight our customers. So definitely a lot of involvement across the board. And before I worked at LeanData, I worked for Blue Jeans, which is like a competitor to Zoom, and most of our events were virtual. So I feel like I kind of had a head start when the pandemic hit, that I was very used to running virtual events, which has definitely worked in my favor.
Thank you, Ashley. Look forward to hearing more from you and all the panelists. So let's kick off with the first question. What, in your mind, is the biggest advantage of virtual events and why? So we'll just go right down the panel here. We'll start with Nick, and we'll go through the rest of the panelists interested in what the biggest advantage is and why you feel that way.
So I think one of the biggest advantages is it just really allows you to be creative and think outside the box and really touch, more accounts thoughtfully, and just leveraging the event side of it. It's, I focus on more of like middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel type things. And that's where I feel like ABM can have a huge impact. And our demand gen team focuses more on the top of the funnel side of it, but we work really closely with sales. And if you're not partnering with sales and you have that alignment, then anything that you're going to do for leveraging events for that, for ABM in general, is going to be useless to some extent. So I would say that would be a big piece of it.
So saw all that great word cloud stuff come in, and there's two things. I mean, Nick had great ideas about things, hearing him speak earlier on previously, but looking at two things to add on top of that. A lot of people mention scale, which is great, but the thing to think about scale is, look, you may have your giant customer summit or your large industry event, whether that's CES or some other large industry events only once a year. The frequency that you can do virtual events is more frequent. And what I mean by that is before, BDI put on all these fantastic events in New York and Chicago and everywhere. And it's like, how frequently can you do that? New York lunch and learn or dinner. And with virtual events, you can do them even more frequently. So that means a very much more consistent funnel when you think about it. So instead of one big bang and then your revenue gets lopsided, you can do that much more consistently. You can scale all of that revenue. And the second thing to think about for all these great virtual events is sort of what Nick touched on earlier, but also looking at conversion, right? How do you convert them faster throughout the funnel? So as you work with your sales team, or maybe you're part of sales ops or marketing ops or customer success ops, and coordinating all of this, one way to think about it is virtual events are essentially meetings. So some ways to educate the sales team, sometimes there's pushback and hesitation around fatigue or doing too much or not enough. And the sales teams are like, we just want more one-to-one meetings. And then you go, hey, wait a second, Mrs. or Mr. CMO or CRO. Virtual events are meetings. They're just meetings at scale. So what marketing can help sales or customer success or any team do is help scale that. So think about how many meetings you can do in a week. There's 40 hours a week. Maybe a salesperson can have 40 meetings. With virtual events, you are increasing their capacity infinitely. So now they're going like, wow, we're getting 160 meetings a week, essentially, whether that's small group format or sort of the large group presentation. So it's sort of really recapturing, reframing, and then thinking about the way to convert people throughout the funnel, whether it's new logo or retention or upsell, cross-sell, and continued growth. There's a lot of great ways that virtual events can help get deeper in that funnel and also increase volume, conversion, and velocity.
So my esteemed colleague here touched on some of the strongest points, but I want to add another one, which is one thing I like very much about virtual events is the fact that they're very effective and efficient from both sides. I mean, from the organizer perspective, you can do a very good job targeting exactly who you want to show to join your event. You know exactly who you're chasing, who you're inviting, what they've done with your company before, how they engage with you before. So you can be super, super, super targeted in terms of the audience that you bring in. It's also very efficient from the participant perspective because it's shorter, it's straight to the point, there is no chit chats. It's just 1 hour, you get all the information that you need, and you go back to your day. So I think it's a win-win.
Thank you, Dana. And I'm going to come back to some of the points that you made after we go through the panel. Ashley.
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious one that a lot of people said was really geography. That was especially true for us. We're based in the Bay Area. A lot of our customers are in the Bay Area, but not all of them. And so being able to reach more people more quickly was huge for us. I think the other point, kind of to piggyback on what Dana just said, is this: with virtual events, we're able to speed up the whole process. So we're able to, one, target the right people. You don't have people who are just showing up for the free food or the free wine or whatever it is. So you have the right people showing up. And then you're able to really just move through the process quickly. So we can route these leads to the sales reps within an hour of the event happening. It's not waiting for the whole event to wrap up and then uploading the list. It's all happening very quickly. So I think that that's been beneficial on all sides.
I don't want to be that lame panelist going, I agree with all my fellow panelists, but I do, because everyone's brought up great points. But one thing that I hear about, and I think it was, Alex that actually said this about frequency. Certainly nobody wants to be in front of screens more than they need to be, but there is this opportunity to really drive specific engagement with customers or prospects that want to know something at a level deeper about your product than they would normally, or than you would normally know. So what I mean by that is if you're in a virtual event and you are able to do essentially what we used to call in the real world birds of a feather, you say, okay, everybody who wants to know about this part of our platform, go here. This part of platform, go here, and they can pre-sign up for that and see a video, talk to the product manager. It can be actually really specific and, you know, as Ashley said, very targeted. And it's you know, education at a level that we really don't have in real life, because you walk into a trade show and you get a conversation as a drive-by, and then you're like, I guess they're interested. So, you know, you're eliminating a lot of the guesswork, and you're actually making it more convenient for people to get the questions they want answered.
So a lot of great points that were brought up by all the panelists. I wanted to revisit some of them and then add a couple new ones too. First of all, I believe that the account-based marketing opportunity, because of no geographic boundaries, is probably the biggest opportunity with virtual events that we've seen. For companies that are truly into ABM, where they have named target accounts and they're really only focused on making sure that the right representatives from those target accounts actually show up, whether they're customer accounts or prospect accounts, it doesn't matter, but that they actually show up at events. There's no better solution than virtual, because we know one of the biggest challenges was when we were doing an event in, say, Dallas. We were limited by the geography in terms of only being able to invite people who live, say, within a half hour of that venue, even if it was just a lunch event. Of course, when you have destination events where people are traveling, it's a whole different story. But now to know that we don't have that geographic boundary and we can really focus in on our target list, and we can also use different strategies. Like we can use an industry only strategy. Like we can do something just for one particular industry that you wouldn't be able to do face to face, because there just wasn't enough population within a certain city to have a meaningful attendance. But when you do that without boundaries, you can now do a special event on just for manufacturing. So you've got all your ABM accounts in manufacturing that you're focusing on. And now you can go deeper in content and really focus on the specific industry topics that are driving the industry, which, you know, sometimes we're not able to do because we have to go cross industry, which sometimes dilutes the value of the content. So the geography value proposition for virtual is huge. Completely agree with that. A couple of other ones that I wanted to bring up was, number one, the digital content opportunity of virtual events. As we know, just like this event is being recorded, most virtual event platforms provide a native raw recording, which if you have some talented editors, whether it's freelance or on your team, you can quickly turn that around into branded content that you can use for content marketing, digital marketing. You could even use to empower the sales team to follow up with people who may be registered but didn't show, but they want to look at the recording. There's so many different opportunities to use digital content as a result of the virtual event to extend the reach of the event, to extend your thought leadership value, etc. The digital content opportunity, I think, is one of the biggest advantages of virtual events, which sort of leads into my next one, which is the data. One of the greatest things about any digital or virtual program is that you have the ability to collect data focused on your account-based marketing target list contacts throughout the entire journey. And now I feel like people are thinking of virtual events not just as a standalone activity, but really as part of an integrated journey that their whole account-based marketing program is taking their prospects on, or even their customers. So it's really just a part of a longer, more comprehensive, more strategic content strategy, where the event is part of that journey, and you're able to capture the data upon, you know, whether people are opening or clicking your invitations, if they're registering, are they showing up to the event, are they not? Did they take a poll? Is that poll question that you all took is going to be attributed to each one of you who took it? There's data everywhere when it comes to virtual events. So smart marketers know how to use that and cultivate that as part of the advantages there. So I wanted to now move on to, now we've talked, about what some of the greatest advantages are. What's holding us back? What are the biggest challenges that we're facing when it comes to virtual events? And so I know we touched on this in the poll, but let's just start the opposite direction. Since we finished with you, Alison, let's start with you this time.
Well, I think the answer that I would have given a year ago would be different than the one I give now. I mean, the biggest problem is people are burnt out on screens. I mean, they just are, and so we have to acknowledge that. And, just by like adding more bells and whistles to a virtual experience probably isn't going to cut it. So one of the disadvantages is the time that it takes for people to attend, and you as a still with the conventional thinking of, well, it should be an hour because that's like hearty content. I think we've got to really rethink what it, just like we did with content, what's snackable, what's beneficial for people, what can we do in 15 minutes in a virtual event to convey information, like acknowledge that people maybe won't be live and they'll watch it later. So I think, the engagement and the way it's changed has been the disadvantage. But with every disadvantage, there's opportunity. So I'll leave it there for the rest of the panelists to comment on that.
So burnout, yeah, that's definitely one that we're all dealing with. Dana.
Yeah, burnout and Zoom fatigue obviously is the main ones, but two more, I would say, smaller challenges that I would add. One is, and you touched on that before when you talk about content, how do you make it last longer? I mean, how do you make the impact of the event continue after the fact? How do you drive people to engage with the content and continue to go back to the content that was showed throughout the event? I mean, how do you expand it beyond this 1 hour that we spent together here? This is one challenge. And another challenge that I also think is an opportunity. How do you foster a community? I mean, in virtual events, especially smaller ABM ones, it's a small group of people. They all share the same interest. They're all here for the same reason. Again, super targeted. It's a wonderful opportunity to create a community of peers. So how do you foster that before the event, during the event, after the event? I mean, I think that you guys are doing a good job right now with introducing us, but how do we keep it last? How do we keep in touch and learn from one another after this all ends?
Great question. We'll definitely come back to. And Ashley.
Yeah, I love that. I think the community, that's exactly what we are trying to do. And what actually has worked really well for us is bringing together customers, building user groups that wouldn't have been possible before. I think the challenge for me is that I have a million ideas of all of the great events that we can do, and being that they're more targeted, they're smaller, so there can be more of them, maybe not for all the same people, but different groups. And it's really just figuring out how, I mean, if my entire job were only events, I would be doing a ton of them, and I wish I could do more. But it's just kind of figuring out the right balance of all of the other things going on as well. And really honing in on what is working. So for us, user groups are working, things that are focused on learning and education. I think when there's a value and you can bring something like that to the table that's going to benefit that person in their day-to-day job, and things that they can learn and walk away from that event knowing that that's going to have an impact on what they're doing, I think that people are more willing to come. Whereas like a wine tasting, that's super fun and people will definitely come to that. But it's a very different type of event, a very different experience.
Those are all great answers to solving all these challenges from the panelists. I think there's two ways we look at all of this. One is the challenge with everybody's like scale is great. And then you take a step back and you go look at the bottlenecks and you go, okay, what's the bottlenecks on the content side? And then the delivery vehicle or channel or source, or what levers can we pull to get these to the right people at the right time? So on the content side, we hear about exhaustion, fatigue, but then if you take a step back as a person, as a consumer, and look at all of the things that are spinning up out there, there's a lack of chips, and there's a lack of chips because there's all these new content creators, whether they're streamers on YouTube or Twitch, and they're getting 60 to 100 to 200,000 live attendees, every time they stream. And, whether you're B2C or B2B marketer, you're going, wow, those people are doing it daily. Is there content exhaustion? Yes, but if those people can do it daily, what can we do to spark joy and get that 10, 20, 30, 60, 100 plus thousand live audiences to watch our content and engage the same way we do as consumers? So the problem is here, right? B2B and B2C marketing, you do see a lot of fatigue, but then you hear from all of the media folks you work with, whether that's Fast Company or Wired or other media publications, that their growth, since we're all working more remotely, that their growth have skyrocketed because more and more people have consumed content. So that's an interesting thing to hear of. There's fatigue, but at the same time, there's more content being consumed. So, it's sort of like, which is it? It's both. And how do you build that content that sparks joy? And that's a, sort of evergreen problem for all marketers to solve. And it's, creating exceptional content is really hard. On the right side, there's sort of the delivery vehicles and mediums. And so it's, again, the bottlenecks are like, there was a great question in chat that said, hey, how do I differentiate from some of my ABM campaigns and then sort of maybe my broader marketing? And there's probably more details in that question that I'm not quite remembering, but looking at that, it's really how you prioritize through your serious decisions, demand funnel, or whatever funnel you use, right? Whether it's their old version of MQLs, SALs, SQLs to close one, or their newest framework of active demand, engage demand, prioritize demand. It's then working with all the teams going, okay, there's a limit in resources. Scale is great. Again, scale is great. Where's the bottlenecks? And then, how do we do more, but at the same time using similar resources? So to answer that ABM question around, sure, we got to do prioritize demand. And for our top customers or top prospects, we can do these more intimate roundtables. And then for the large market, whether you're focused on SMB or consumer, we're doing these larger presentations that we're streaming live. There's always a balance on that because resources are infinite. So then it's really working with data scientists to figure out what and forecast what that looks like. And then, can dive in more into, okay, if you're just starting up in a fast growth company, you may not have resources to data scientists. Then what do you do? So yep, that was my long spiel, and I'll let the other folks continue on. I think Nick is, yeah.
I mean, honestly, everyone kind of hit on it. And I think it's trying to figure out, how do you leverage your data and how to build community? And kind of a decent example of this is I run a monthly meetup for field marketers, demand gen people, and kind of event marketers. And it started as something where I just wanted people to have a space to kind of build community and bounce ideas off of each other. And it's grown to over 200 people every month. And so, my goal is to somewhat own field marketing. I want people to associate it with my name. So everything that I do from posting on LinkedIn, it's all about building community and everything that comes around. And so subtly, I work for a company that sells to field marketers. So in the back of people's minds, using that community and using that data, people will always associate my name with the company that I work for, and they'll know who to come to push through. And it helps me leverage a lot of ABM campaigns too.
I think Slack has been so powerful. Like there's LinkedIn, but Slack actually, I don't know, Nick, if you were part of that field marketing Slack channel, but I'm on like 3 different Slack channels, and that has been just a gold mine as a companion piece to whether it's about virtual events. I mean, there's even some pretty crazy stuff about virtual events on this Slack channel I'm on about, it was around sponsors' rights. We haven't talked about sponsorship, but there's a lot of great stuff out there to build community, keep the conversation going.
Yeah, I love some of the themes that we're coming up with here. And I think everyone pretty much agrees that Zoom fatigue is one of the greatest challenges that we have. I do think it's worthwhile to delve a little bit deeper into what that actually means and what the solution is. I guess we need to be a little careful with confusing, screen fatigue and Zoom fatigue with pandemic fatigue. One of the attendees asked a question in terms of content. Are we still talking about the pandemic? Is that still in play? Because obviously when things happened in March, that's all everyone talked about. What's it like for you to work at home? This is what it's like for me. What's your company going through? This is what mine's going through. But we're a year later now, so we're in a different, time frame. And we feel here at BDI that the biggest solution for fatigue is really maximizing engagement with the attendees and really focusing on the attendee experience. That's really the differentiation, because I feel like there's been a lot of people, and especially salespeople, which we should talk about, because ultimately as field marketers, one of our main constituents are our sales teams in terms of, creating opportunities for them, including them in events. And I think one of the things we've had to overcome is that there's been sort of a stereotype of virtual events as being a typical webinar, where you're just having one directional content being pushed out at you, where you're either having speakers with presentations or even panels, but there's very minimal in terms of attendee responses, engagement, interaction. And I feel like for our clients, some of their sales teams feel that it's not even worth participating really or showing up to virtual events, because there's no real opportunity for them to do that relationship building, connection making that we all strive for when it came to our face-to-face events, right? So, one of the really important things is to make sure that we are creating formats and agendas and including not only the attendees, but the sales teams as well, when it comes to preparing them with how to behave in virtual events, what their role is, putting some planning into making sure that if they're in a breakout room, that they're in a room with their named target accounts, so it's worth their while to show up and to participate. So we've been focusing on maximizing engagement through breakout rooms, chats, polling, whatever types of interactive experiences you can have, making sure that people are participating and that there is an opportunity for real relationship building. So that's really where our approach when it comes to solving Zoom fatigue is that, let's maximize the attendee experience, let's make sure that it's highly engaging, etc. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of bounce that off the panel, see if there's any reaction. I see, Adam, you have a reaction. Yeah, sales teams. Of course, the SVP of sales is going to say that.
Yeah, maybe one thing to add to what you just talked about is we look at virtual events like show. I mean, we look at it as if we're planning a show, a big show, a live show. And we try to we try to include as many videos as possible. We try to have live music, so while people are coming in, their videos, and during breaks we have videos, and during the show we have videos, and we have engaging music. And we really try, at least again, not for all of them, but for the more important ones, really build it as if we're building a show, because I feel like we're competing not against webinars. We're competing against TV shows and YouTube videos, because we're on the screen all the time. So we need to match to those type of experiences.
I wanted to pivot to one of the attendee questions. Thank you, Ryan, for asking. Do you want to ask your question live?
Sure. I just asked how panelists think about balancing more fun events or events less focused on product or on any sort of presentation versus the more educational events.
So like the virtual wine tasting, virtual cooking, sort of activity.
Yeah. I started my role early this year and I got handed an event to just sort of execute on, but it's like a celebrity chef, which I'm not a foodie, so I didn't know who the guy was. I know that some people know who he is. And I think some of our sales team is excited, but I kind of wonder what the value is of these name brand. I don't know that I'd call them famous, but sort of like famous speakers versus like, I don't know, hosting a more middle funnel, bottom funnel, like educational session.
Sure. Does any of the panelists have some thoughts on the effectiveness of fun events, celebrity speakers?
I had a couple of great experiences. The Wing, which some of you may know, it's a women kind of co-working space, which has had some challenges. But you know, when we first were told we couldn't go into the space anymore, they started standing up a bunch of really interesting events that made with celebrities that made you feel like, oh my God, they're right there on the screen. Like I can finally learn how to make pie crust that's not disgusting, or I can learn how to hem my jeans properly. It was super exciting. And now we, you know, we've seen it all. But I think that I was in a CMO roundtable that Sixth Sense did, which was so great. And what I loved about they did a tequila tasting, and they brought somebody in from who lives in Jalisco, and I got yet another box of something. I thought it was wine. It was 3 bottles of amazing tequila, and we sat there and we tasted it, and she talked about it, and we got on chat and said, look, this tastes like this to us. And it was, you know, obviously it was tequila was involved, so it got more fun as the time went on, but it was really interesting. I learned a ton that I didn't know. I didn't know that Jalisco is Mexico's version of Champagne region in France, you know, all these things. So I think that, you know, the key is really understanding your audience. I mean, this was like mainly women. We were sent scarves. We were sent things that go back to ABM for a second, like how well do you know your customers? You know, just flinging celebrities that don't connect with them, that's not going to work. That's actually going to leave a bad impression. So, you know your audience really well, and then you can do fun stuff like that you know, takes into account that it's, you know, 5 o'clock somewhere and everybody's kind of ready for the end of that, you know. So I think there's a huge opportunity. You just have to be creative and ask them what they like.
What are your thoughts, Alison, about when you're saying obviously know your audience, which is always rule number 1 for any marketing activity, right? From our perspective, I would argue that for people who are in the middle of your funnel or people who are already customers, that these type of events are more effective because there's an established relationship. So it's kind of like, you know, we're tasting wine, we're tasting tequila, we're cooking together, but we all have something in common, and that is, you know, we're partners, we work together, or that there's some sort of deeper connection here. Would you agree that that approach might work a little less well for people who are purely new prospects, not even in your funnel yet? Does it seem a little awkward to be?
Oh, for sure. I mean, yeah, I would agree with that. I think, you know, if you look at top of funnel, you know, what would the event experience be like? What are the, I mean, would those people even show up? You know, like maybe that is when you bring in like a great band or something just to introduce them to the vibe of your company. I think middle of the funnel, you know, in my opinion, a lot of that is around a decision point, which is, you know, you or someone else for buying a product. And so, you know, that's where education is really important, probably a little bit of brand experience. I mean, the greatest thing about virtual events is, and also the greatest challenge for many companies is, it is the one time where your brand is kind of a 360-degree thing. I mean, except for the in real life part, is, you know, you've got videos, you've got educational content, you're bringing together speakers, it's your executives, your salespeople, like it's all right there. So you really have to think carefully about what people would like, or what you think they might like. And certainly super okay to say, hey, prospect, you know, we've been talking for 3 months and we're doing this thing, and what do you think about this idea? Why not ask? We always avoid asking our customers, and I'm sure that Ashley would probably disagree with me on that. She'd be like, yeah, we should ask them more often. But that is my view, is there's a huge opportunity to do things better than we would have done them before, when we were, you know, could do whatever we wanted.
I'm noticing a comment here from Mariam. Mariam, thank you for your comment. Would you like to share a little bit more? Not that I'm putting you on the spot, but I guess I am. Would you like to share a little bit more with the group about how you incorporate a customer speaker in your fun events, or how you make them family friendly?
Sure. I think having a customer speaker, I've never worked at a company. OneStream has great customer relationships who are willing to speak at things, so we're very lucky. And they're all into speaking at whether it's a tequila tasting or a whiskey or whatever it is that we do. I like to make them family friendly, or whatever that may mean for everybody, so that if it is after hours, people don't feel like they're taking time away. If you do a chef and hour and you do it, you can make it family friendly so your kids can join in, or your spouse, whatever it may be. I think that's been super effective for us. And it doesn't make it feel like you're still on Zoom. You're still on Zoom, but you're on Zoom with your family. So it makes it a little bit more fun.
That's
So
so
that's been helpful for
interesting.
us.
I haven't heard that before. Thank you for sharing that. That's
course.
pretty creative.
I
Yeah.
love that. I think I saw sometime last year, I think it was Marketo did like a cookie baking contest or something. And it was like kids welcome. It was very family friendly. And I loved that.
Well, it's the idea from the movie events that we used to do when we did things in person, right? You did all those movie events. You're always open to families. That made it more, a lot more people came. They brought their families, brought their kids, that type of thing with Star Wars or whatever the movie may be. I'm thinking Matrix 4 is coming out, BTW, everybody, for December, putting it out there. I don't know. I think it's a big deal. I don't know. I never watched them, but I know people loved it. So I'm thinking about how can we make it where you incorporate everybody and it still feels like it's fun, you're learning something, and a customer speaking, which is always great.
Appreciate that. Adam, if you're paying attention, you're still there. I'd like to pick on you as the sole representative of leading a sales team that's on, maybe not the sole, but one of the few folks who are leading a sales team. Well, what is the mindset of salespeople when it comes to how they look at virtual events versus face-to-face events? What are you hearing from your team?
I think, for them, it's the biggest, the biggest opportunity at any event is for them to rub elbows with and start to form those relationships, right? Because they're code calling, they're sending emails, they're sending LinkedIn in mails, they're making calls, and it's not quite the same when you see someone in person. You can begin to form just a different type of relationship, even if it's just casual in nature. There's that connection that just happens in a way that just doesn't happen any other way, and it could just spur that conversation. So I think that and that's what I always kind of liked about events that are formatted as such that they promote that, where they put the salesperson in a position to be sitting next to someone else, not with the idea of selling them, but with the idea of beginning to just create that rapport and that relationship that could lead to a follow-up discussion. So, and I think anything that helps promote that or put a sales rep in that position is going to be welcome. And I think that's what I think the team has been starving for. And if there's a way to solve that with virtual events, I love the idea of breakout sessions where they're part of a smaller group where there's interactivity. Some of that I could see being accomplished virtually. Is it the same as being in a restaurant? No, but is it the next best thing? Could be. Could be. I mean, it's definitely something that I'm looking at in terms of pushing, in terms of wanting to experiment with.
Thank you, Adam. So let me go back to the panel and say, now that we've heard Adam say what he's looking for as a head of sales, how do we create those opportunities for sales teams to interact with prospects or customers? How are we doing it?
Yeah, so taking a stab at that, Alison touched on that previously, and sort of putting that structure and asking the customers and asking the questions. So, there's sales reps that we work with, and they're like, oh, I met this prospect previously at a bar before the pandemic, and we closed this $1 million deal. That's great. That's getting lucky, right? So how do you make that process driven? So it's not like, hey, we have a giant, dining and wining expense that the sales team goes out, and building that process into, okay, there's happy hours. How do you get that to be ROI focused and make that sure structurally that generates, whether that's customer retention, expansion, or new logos. And so Alison mentioned, asking that customer. And so it's when you're asking that customer prospect, why change, why now? That's sort of weaving that process into the conversation. So while you do the cookie baking, the happy hours, you're asking, you know, great sales and marketing teams will look to figure out what the pain points are and start to dislodge the status quo. And why Slack is so fun, but also at the same time get stuff done is because people don't want to sit through like a 3 or 5 hour, whether it's a marketing conference or 2-day marketing conference, or, you know, sit through a giant sales presentation to not get their question answered. So they're coming in Slack, they're going, I've got this pain point, got this question I want to solve today. Boom, you answer it immediately, and then you can figure out where they are in the buying cycle. So that's one of the great things. And sort of, you know, BDI has done a wonderful job for targeting the top accounts and figuring out how to get that into a replicable process so you can help people convert down the funnel. And that's the same thing for, you know, happy hours. If you're saying why change, why now, right? So not just only in Slack, but if you're doing happy hours, your sales and marketing teams are sort of formulating that and putting that into a process where you're going, okay, how do I dislodge the status quo if it's do nothing or they're buying our competitors? And why do you do it now? Right? If we're looking at their buying cycle and they have 3-year contracts, or if they're, you know, a SaaS, they're on a very lightweight SaaS product where you swipe a credit card, why do you change their buying behavior today? So it comes back to that sort of funnel of awareness, consideration, and valuation. And it's just putting those pieces together to move them throughout the sales and marketing funnel. So I love Alison's answer about that, and, you know, just taking a step further and digging into making sure that all those pieces are in all the channels you do. So.
Thank you, Alex. Anyone else have any thoughts on how do you support salespeople in these virtual events?
I think it's not really different than any other marketing activity that we're planning. And so it starts with the before, when you decide to gather on the target audience or on the hit list of the people that we want to invite to the event. I mean, it should be aligned with the sales target list for obviously. We also oftentimes work with them to do outreach, reach out to participants or to people who sign up before the event. Hey, I know that you're going to be there, blah, blah, blah. I mean, use that as an opportunity for them to interact during the event. And I like everything that Adam said, provide them with as many opportunities as possible, whether it's through breakout rooms or even give them speaking opportunities, or just give them little roles so they get visibility throughout the event. And most importantly, after the event, share with them any piece of data that I have about the engagement, about the area of interest of the people who attended the event, and work with them on the follow-up. So it's really hand in hand from beginning to end.
Thank you, Dana. I want to move over to a related question, which is, how do you effectively use the data you collect at virtual events? A few of us have talked before about the entire journey of people, whether they're customers or prospects in the ABM journey. And we're collecting a lot of data about people, from registration, from how do they respond to our invitations, to how they behave on the event, to the polling questions that they take, to the chats they submit. There's data everywhere. So who wants to take a stab at how do you get your hands around that? How do you organize that? How do you, maximize your ROI as a result of the data that we're collecting?
I can take a stab at it, and I'm sure that Nick probably would chime in since we're both working with Goldcast. I mean, one of the strengths of their platform is there's a pretty seamless data connection with your marketing automation, but it's not just like, oh, Alison showed up or Steve showed up or Steve didn't show up. It's to the level of Stephanie downloaded this piece of content, or she asked this question. So it's very prescriptive in terms of what you can do as follow-up. So the success that I've seen and heard about is where you're looking at everything, that's all the behaviors, all the questions, everything that the attendees have done before, during, and to some degree after the event, and then parsing that and assigning sales some to-dos, and marketing will do other things. For example, like sales, like customized first touches and one-on-ones, like, hey, I know we've been trying to reach each other, so glad you were able to show up. It's very, very personalized, because really, when you think about it, like we just never had this data before. Like, and events are like the #1 lead gen source. And so it's like, oh, wait, suddenly I know everything about this person, or at least as much as I can. So I think that that's the key, is really being, pretty diligent and critical, go through a critical thought process about what to send and how to react to what people have done.
Thank you, Alison. Anyone else want to take a stab at the data opportunity?
Yeah, I would just really quickly add to that is, kind of like Alison said, it's really like the tight integrations on like the backside. Most platforms only use their data through Zapier, and they only focus at the surface level. So you can't really take actionable steps outside of that. So being able to leverage a platform that will do that for you and do it all through a seamless integration bidirectionally is important, because you can go and you can actually attribute real ROI to the things that we do every single day.
Thank you, Nick. I did want to open it up first, maybe to 1 or 2 questions from the audience. I know we've covered some of them in the chat, but if anyone wants to ask their question live or even state a comment.
I'll just kind of highlight one point. I think a lot of times, probably when the pandemic started, a lot of people tried to replicate virtual events as we would do a physical event. So they would try to have these booths and, basically try to see how we can replicate a physical experience in the virtual world. And I think that is the biggest mistake you can make, because the physical world is different than the virtual world. And something that we've learned through the process is that you need to treat a virtual event as a virtual event, and have the right tools and engagement in the virtual event. Don't try to do a physical event in the virtual world. So that's one thing that I would like to kind of highlight.
Is that primarily shaped by your experiences with larger conferences and trade shows as a potential sponsor? Is that primarily where that's coming from?
I mean, yes. So, at least with the business that I handle, I've stayed away from large trade shows because I don't see the value of networking in virtual events as effective as it used to be, especially in the large trade show model. We've sponsored a couple of events and we had a few experiences, and we were like, this is really not the kind of engagement we would want as a sponsor for virtual events. So we then kind of pivoted to more smaller, closed room, special focus group events rather than large trade shows, because there's very little networking opportunity that you can really truly have engagement in a large trade show environment.
Thank you, Noshir. Appreciate that. I think one question that's going on right now, one conversation that I see in the chat from my colleague, Jessica. Jessica, do you want to ask that question to the entire group as far as how we use the data and how we message people?
Yeah, no, I was just curious for Nick and Alison to talk about follow-ups that incorporate that data. Obviously, or at least in my opinion, I agree with Nick that doing it on a personalized one-off level is obviously going to be most effective and most targeted, but how are we able to scale that? And is it worth it to scale it or to divide and conquer with your sales team? So automation versus personalization on a one-off level.
I mean, it's kind of the ABM, same as any ABM strategy. Like tier 1 is going to be one motion, tier 3 is going to be another motion. So tier 3, it could be automated. And if you have your ABM set up right, and the segment of people who are in that model, you can simply follow up, in a friendly way with a certain type of automated email or other. And, of course, like with Alyce, you could send them a t-shirt versus you send tier 1 this tequila. I mean, there's all, half of it is really orchestration and thinking through the workflow. And then for obviously the tier 1, it really should be, we're doing all of this for sales, right? Presuming that this is a field event and not like a rock concert, which, is the other conversation going on, like, how do we do this? Big events, that's something else. But the salespeople need a job. So give them that job. It's a personal touch. It's a phone call. Oh my God, how great would that be to get a phone call? Might just take it. You're like, hey, let's go for a walk while we're on our phones. that's how I would just be careful with automation. It's wonderful, but you have to know what you're doing and plan.
Yeah, I would just add to that too. Like, think about like how much automation happens on LinkedIn and all these other social platforms. Like, hello, like first name. Like, you can sniff out automation like so far away. And with ABM, kind of goes back to like personalization. It's so key. And so our BDR team actually rolls up under marketing. And so for them, it's more of a quality versus quantity thing. And so they really focus on like digging deeper and figuring out these people's kind of, we call it like their 5 to 9 versus their 9 to 5, like what are they passionate about outside of work? And it's understanding the person versus the persona. And once you kind of figure that piece of it out, you are able to unlock a lot of conversations.